I am going to give you the real truth about the National Association of Realtors settlement. I'm also going to share ideas, whether you're the buyer, the seller, or an agent on either side of that with the new situation. How does it work as we move forward? NAR agreed recently to pay $418 million over approximately 4 years. This sounds like a big sum of money, but yet you know that some of the large brokers have already agreed to a settlement also. But when one divides the amount, the money, and the amount of potential qualifying consumers, it works out to about $15 per person in that payout. So I'm going to dig in. And so remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon to stay tuned. So let's dive in. What are the consequences? What does it look like on the other side when mid-July gets here and these changes happen? So the new rules of compensation on the MLS. And we'll start with that. So the right of the consumers to continue to have cooperative compensation as an option, so long as they pursue it off of the MLS through negotiation and consultation with real estate professionals, is still allowed. It's still available, and it has to be done without putting it in the MLS. Listing agents will not be allowed to include that offer of compensation on the MLS as they have done before. And this rule goes into effect somewhere around mid-July is what the National Association of Realtors has stated. There will continue to be many ways in which the buyer brokerage could be compensated. These will include offers of compensation. They could be communicated just so they're communicated off the MLS. And as many people have believed and is a long-standing situation, that it's in the best interest of the sellers and the buyers and their brokers to be able to make offers of compensation, but using the MLS to communicate these offers of compensation will no longer be an option. They will be prohibited moving forward from this decision and this agreement that the National Association of Realtors, NAR, has agreed to. Buyer's agents will no longer automatically be paid by the listing brokers. Although listing and buyer broker compensation will be decoupled, NAR said there can be three main ways that buyer agents can still get paid. First of all, buyer clients can pay their agents directly. This needs to have a buyer's agency agreement, and it's going to need to be communicated very thoroughly. Sellers can also offer compensation in the form of a concession. So there's a second way that the buyer's agent get paid. And also the listing broker can offer a portion of their compensation to the buyer agent. However, all these terms of compensation have to be negotiated between the agents and their clients directly. They cannot be communicated through the multiple listing service. The types of compensation available for buyer brokers would continue to take multiple forms depending on the broker and the consumer, how their negotiations go. But they include, but are not limited to, these are ways you can do it: a fixed fee commission paid directly by the consumer. There could be concession items that come from the seller. There could be a portion of the listing broker's compensation, and all of this compensation would continue to be negotiable and should always be negotiated between agents and the consumers that they serve. There's going to be implications for the home buyers and the sellers. Some of these things will look a little different also. The settlement will preserve the choices that consumers have regarding real estate services and compensation. They don't lose anything, but it just changes things. The settlement provides that the seller may communicate seller concessions, such as buyer closing costs, via the MLS, provided that such concessions are not conditioned on the use of payment to a buyer broker. So you can definitely use concessions. Also, the new rule about the written agreement. So in some states, somewhere around 18 states in the country right now, buyer agent agreements are already used, but not in all. This will soon be a rule. So NAR has encouraged all members to use a written agreement with your buyer because they help consumers understand exactly what services and value will be offered and how much they will cost. So this settlement provides an MLS participant working with buyers must enter into a written agreement with those buyers. Most times that is called a buyer's agency. So that agency is between the buyer and the buyer's agent. This change also, as some of these other changes, go into effect in mid-July of 2024. So what are implications for NAR members and home buyers and home sellers? After the rule goes into effect, the MLS participants acting for the buyer would be required to enter into a written agreement with a buyer before touring a home. So they're not going to be able to show you a home without a written agreement, knowing that you understand how the commission structure works. These agreements can help consumers understand exactly what services and values will be provided and for how much that is going to cost. The reality is that most mortgages ultimately said to Fannie and Freddie, but have no provisions for commissions to be financed. So in fact, the VA program expressly prohibits the borrower from paying any form of communication in a real estate transaction. So what that means is so many times in a VA loan, there is nothing down. If there has to be something paid, the veteran won't be able to pay the commission. So there are some pretty big objects that are going to have to be overcome with this settlement that will go into different things. There's also USDA loans, which are zero down, in which the buyer also is not allowed to pay anything. And so it's going to cause some changes and some forethought from the National Association of Realtors and in the settlement situation that they can handle these situations where no money can be paid by the buyer at closing. So there are a few things in the mortgage industry that will also come into play. I know that with the settlement, there is also an option that this thing could be delayed from mid-July to a later date. But we will keep you posted with how this goes. But their two biggest changes are requirement of buyer's agency for the buyer and the buyer's agent, and two, the commission cannot be communicated on the MLS, and those lead to all the other things. Stay tuned. We will keep you up to date. There will be more news coming. See ya.